And then like if I don't go outside,
Good afternoon.
like if I'm just in the office,
So,
I walk outside, my eyes can't focus.
welcome to this year's annual oversight committee meeting. I am Lisa Davina. And we'll start with a moment of silence, and then we go to the pledge of allegiance. Just please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's go to the introductions. If you would please, committee, please state your name and your affiliation, your jurisdiction. Start on this side, please.
My name's Peter Young, with the city of Bunnell. Anything else? Oh, yesterday was my birthday. Happy
Another milestone.
You made it.
Yes.
Yeah. Dean Sechrist, City of Bunnell Commissioner.
Kim Carney, BOCC.
Andy Dance, County Commission Chair.
Will Furry, School Board Chair.
Janie Reddy, School Board Member.
Ty Miller, Palmco City Council.
Charlie Gambaro, Palmco City Council.
And I thought all the people at our meeting the other day was for my birthday, but they weren't.
Let's go on to Boyle for the election of the chair.
Thank you. So I'll just take nominations for the chair. There's no need to second the nomination. So any nominations for chair?
Nominate Andy Dance.
I was just going to nominate you.
Well, too late.
Oh, you can.
I second it.
You don't need to
Any
second.
other nominations? Okay, then Mr. Dance, by acclamation, will be the chair, and
Congratulations.
I'll hand you the all-powerful hammer.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, everybody. I thank you for the honor, I guess, right? I just want to make sure that we discuss our business at hand. And again, I think we've evolved from the past meetings into a really cordial and beneficial working relationship with everybody at the table. So as long as we stick to that and get our business done, we're good to go. We've come a long way, the group has, from a few years ago. So the gentleman in the back, we do have some open chairs if you'd like to come up and sit with us.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Eyesight's failing and hearing is going too, so thank you very much.
No, it's fine.
I'll be a silent.
If we had a big crowd, it'd be harder, but.
I appreciate that. I'll be just a silent
All right.
spectator, I guess.
Again, we'll go ahead and review the minutes. Everybody should have a copy of the minutes from the last meeting. It was June 12th, 2024. School Concurrency and Local Agreement Oversight Committee. Mr. Marlin, should we accept them, or do you want a motion for approval?
I think accepting them are fine.
All right, if there's no comments or questions or corrections on the minutes, I'll give everybody a minute to look through their notes. All right, if there's no comments, we'll, the motions are approved as submitted. All right, so we'll start off the agenda, the working part of the meeting, with the ILA Working Group report. Ms. Davina, it is your floor.
Yes, thank you. I'm Lisa Davina. I'm the new planner for the school district. Thank you. Let's go to this one. The previous slide, please. This will be what we will be going through the next few minutes, or hopefully hour. And next slide, please. So the interlocal agreement is made up of staff from the county, from the cities, and from the school board. And we meet twice per the interlocal agreement, twice biannually. Our last meetings were in December the 5th and March the 27th of this year. During those meetings, we reviewed the district's 5-year work plan, the October 2024 enrollment and the trends coming out of it, and the current and projected level of service. We also reviewed mitigation payments and vouchers. The mitigation payments and the impact fees received by the school board will be in your annual report. And then we drafted your annual report. And then the next meeting that we're scheduled for is the December 4th. Is on December 4th. That will be the first Thursday of the month. At that time, if later on the committee approves the recommendation by the working group, we will also be drafting the language for that amendment that we're bringing to you today. Because we have new members to the committee, we are going to go through an overview of school concurrency and how we do the process. So right now, we're going through a refresher for concurrency. As you know, concurrency is making sure that public facilities and services are available at the time that new developments are coming to serve those new residents. And so we also establish level of service. And for the school district, the level of service standard is 100% of permanent fish capacity. We will define what fish capacity is, what the different capacities are in a moment. But our level of service is 100% of the student stations that are in fish. That is actually current right now or in construction within 3 years. So if we have a school that's under construction and it will open in 3 years, that capacity will be included in the permanent fish capacity in our concurrency review. The level of service is there to prevent overcrowding in our schools. And the concurrency process is coordinated through the interlocal agreement with the city planners working together with the school district on monitoring enrollment, capacity, and level of service, mitigation agreements, and everything that comes in for the interlocal agreement. Next slide, please. This is our how we do our concurrency review. So an application comes in, and if it meets requirement, meaning there is capacity in the schools, in the elementary, middle school, or high school, then we release a school concurrency reservation letter, meaning we reserve capacity for that development. We provide student stations in the future when those students from those developments come into our schools. However, if say they don't meet the requirement, there's no capacity at any level, elementary, middle, or high, then we issue a determination saying that there's no available capacity. the development can do either two things. They can wait until capacity is available, or they can go through, they can proceed to mitigation. Mitigation is when they pay for student stations and they get dollar for dollar credit. The second workflow is how mitigation is approved. So if the developer wants to proceed to mitigation, then we negotiate the mitigation. Basically, they pay for the student stations that they're going to be generating. So say in middle school, there's no capacity for like 15 middle school students. So they will mitigate for 15. And the cost that's attached to it is from the DOE's cost of construction, and this changes monthly. And then the mitigation agreement is among the city, the developer, and the school district. And then if the board approves the agreement, then the district staff issues the certificate of school concurrency. Do you have any questions?
So what determines the projected impact? So, you know, X amount of homes equals how many students at each level?
We will discuss that in
Okay.
in the student generation rate. That will be where I'll discuss that in a
Okay.
few. But these are the definitions right now that we're going to be working in. The student station is the net square footage required by each student in a given in a facility, given the instructional programs that are going to be in that campus. So you have your grades, your kindergarten to 12th grade, and then you have the laboratories, the athletic spaces and everything. Some spaces do not generate student stations, but the classrooms, the primary, intermediate, and secondary classrooms do generate student stations. The level of service, you know, is the utilization, enrollment versus capacity. So that's the percentage, the level of service, the utilization rate that we have. Student generation rate is the district-wide average of all public school students per dwelling unit. So if you're gonna see later, our student generation rate is for single family, for example, for elementary it's 0.08 something. So towards the lifetime of that house, that's gonna be the number of students that it's gonna generate. So ownership changes. So during the lifetime for that house, there will be a student, there will not be a student, but that's the average. The student generation rate is the average for that house. And then certificate of school concurrency is just is that certificate that we issue saying that yes, you are reserved this number of students for your development in this school. So it will be elementary, middle, or high. Next slide, please. So these are this is how we define capacities, and there are different capacities if you're going to be looking at it. The first two, student capacity and student stations, are from definitions from the school, from DOE. And so for student capacity, it's the estimated number of students that can be housed in a campus. So the permanent student stations, well, student capacity, DOE provides a utilization factor for each school level. For elementary, it's 100% of permanent student stations. Middle is 90%, and high school is 95%. For student capacity, they apply for middle school, for example, if our permanent capacity is 100%, and utilization factor for that is 90% of permanent student stations. So your student capacity is going to be 90 student stations. For elementary, it's going to be 100%, so that's 100 student stations, and it goes, and so on. So permanent student stations is, the way I put it sometimes is the as-built number of student stations that are in the campus. So they are, for example, you have so many numbers of primary classrooms. Primaries are your first kindergarten to second grade. Intermediate is going to be your 4th and to 5th, and then your secondary is going to be your 9th to 12th. So each, based on class size, carry a student station, each classroom. And then laboratories also carry student stations, and that's your as-built. That's all the number of student stations without the utilization factor. Available capacity, as I've mentioned previously, is your student capacity, which is the first definition. The student capacity currently and in the next 3 years, if you're going to be opening, say, a new classroom addition or a new school. So we consider that in our concurrency review, those incoming capacity. Permanent fish capacity is the same as your student capacity. Utilization factors like what you have here for DOE is already factored in that. It does not include the portables, so because portables are temporary. Reserve capacity is the number of student stations per school that is reserved for that development. So each development, when they come in and they receive certificate of school concurrency, they do have student stations that are reserved for them. So their students will have ideally a seat when those students come in. Any questions?
Which, based on the table, you have almost 3,000 reserved seats.
Yes. That's reserve capacity at our different levels.
And is there a expiration date on your concurrency agreements?
Yes, for DRIs, they do have, their capacity is already vested, except for those developments, right, that are.
DRIs, there's not.
There's not.
Unless, so what happens if the DRI that has been stagnant and they decide not to proceed with it?
That's up to you guys.
Yes.
You
I
guys.
was gonna say, there's plenty of inactive DRIs.
You guys
out there,
have to go
right?
to them and say, I'm taking away they have a vested right.
Right, well, at some point, they'll decide they want to either redo it or abandon it.
Perhaps.
So that's the time then that you would revisit that?
Yeah.
Or are they
We
just
don't-
vested?
They're vested.
Even if they
In what
redo their
you guys-
plan, say
you
they
guys-
come back to the
you guys
city
already-
to amend the DRI?
Yeah, they're vested. I mean, the way that process works is that when they come back and say they want to abandon or rescind, then they're supposed to enter into an agreement with, and it'd be you guys for all the other things other than schools, but for us, it would be schools, where we ensure that whatever mitigation they said they were gonna provide, that they're gonna provide. And then you can go forward and rescind or abandon or whatever.
Like, most of them is a dedication of some sort, or an
Right.
agreement to build something,
Yep.
so if they
They'd still be
decide they're
vested.
abandoning all of it, they abandon what they
Yeah.
agreed to with you would be null and void.
It depends on what they want to do, yeah. I mean, if they're abandoning it and going to a PD, then in the statute it says you gotta make sure, for whatever they're coming forward with, that there's whatever mitigation they're providing, they still have to provide it under an agreement between the district and them, prior to you guys approving the rescission. or
So
abandonment.
would it be a new mitigation agreement
It'd be
based on like if they're switching to an MPD?
It'd be like other districts you call, I think we have one we did, we called it a settlement agreement. I don't know if you could call it anything. It's not quite the same as a prop share because it's specific for a DRI.
Asking those questions to the benefit of my Palm Coast folks.
Sure, but we don't have the right, like, the local governments are the ones that granted those rights and gave that vesting. We're just holding the seats, because they could show up tomorrow and pull a permit. And you guys can't stop them.
Right.
Yeah, no, they have the entitlement to do that.
Yeah. And that's been, we've had this conversation here, in this room several times.
Well, yeah, this has probably been a topic since 2012 or whatever, since the DRIs were created, so.
And I know Dave, and I'm sure Lisa as well, we're tracking as permits are pulled and taking the reserve, trying to reduce the reserve to increase the capacity. So which I think was prior to all of our couple of years of discussion, it was not happening. So we are trying to address that.
Okay. Sorry, Ned.
Yeah, we're deconflicting the capacity that's already there for the DRIs, but for for proportionate share agreements, that the reserve capacity does not expire.
It's a valid concern though, because, you know, we can assume that the DRIs will never be activated, but they still have the entitlement to do it at any time. So it's like, okay, we're reserving all this capacity on the basis that they could do it, but they probably won't. So then, you know, you're kind of stuck halfway in between.
The district doesn't have the right to take away their vested right. And if I'm the landowner, I would be concerned about that.
No, I got you.
We're happy to remove reserve capacity if you guys hold their vested rights.
All right, let's go back to the presentation.
Okay, so how do we calculate available capacity? So this is the formula that we normally use. So available capacity is your permanent fish capacity times adopted level of service minus what is your enrollment, and current enrollment, and your reserve capacity. So for example, in Flagler, Palm Coast, you have a permanent fish capacity of 2,503 students. That already includes the utilization factor of 95% of the permanent student stations. And your adopted level of service for high school is 100%. You have an enrollment of 2,574, and then your reserve capacity, your capacity utilization, if you add enrollment and reserve, is 3,327 students when those developments come in. And so now your available capacity is a minus 824. The level of service for that projected one is 133%, and which is way over standards. But your current utilization at the moment, which is your enrollment and your current capacity, is 103%. So you're just over capacity for a little. Any questions?
Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes.
In the workflow or decision chart that you had previously, when the decisions are being made whether to put in the proportionate share mitigation, and there's a decision there whether capacity is at level, under level, over level, so is it this final value that is the determining factor in that decision flow chart, not necessarily fish or the LOS on its own?
This already has fish and the level of service in it, so yes, this is the.
So this overall number is what we're looking at. And so, of course, this number doesn't take into account, let's say, those unique or niche programs. For example, the maybe woodworking or the IB programs, where typically a class size is way under what the required minimum class size is. So that is where some of that pain point is maybe not visible here.
Yes, and most of the districts use this calculation. And in the past few years, we have been grappling with how to factor in, like, for example, BPK. Because we are, for example, in special programs, ESE. So say your ESE program only requires only 5 seats, 5 students in there. but they're going to use a primary classroom which has 18 student stations. So now your your student station is now reduced by 13. And still, because based on the interlocal agreement, we base it on permanent fish capacity, which is.
So can I ask a question regarding that? In the portion that is the calculation of student stations, that specifically states that we include certain specialty programs in that calculation. So shouldn't that capture that?
It's the definition that we are working off of is the permanent fish capacity, unless we can change it to utilization, which is how the schools arrange their programs and how they assign programs to their classrooms. Then we will still be using permanent
So this
fish
alternative method would better capture specialty programs and things like
Yes.
that? Okay.
But to be clear, that would be a change. That'd be a change to the ILA.
So to help answer your question, what I was gonna tell you is that all of our schools have different, programs for ESC. And so the level of services in those programs will change from year to year based upon our population. So, for example, if you have a behavior unit at one school, 1 year that behavior unit might have 150 kids, and the next year it may not have but 25. So it's constantly changing, so that will change
That's
the
interesting.
student stations based upon that. So, what Mr. Bean is saying, we're trying to use the permanent student stations and not base it on that. Because
Right.
that changes.
To your point, like 5 years ago, Belterre had no ASD classes, and now they have 7, right?
Yes, that'd be a good example. And so I can just tell you that, looking at, for example, she mentioned VPK, we do see that there's going to be an increase in some of the programs that we have with VPK that are going to affect this based upon just our population. So that does change.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
How long have we been using this formula to come up with the values here for capacity?
This is what most districts have been using.
For how long?
This district, since we entered the ILA, since all the parties did, I guess, about 2 years ago, maybe?
Okay. You know, I think it's, the formula is interesting because when I served on the school board before Mr. Dance here, I remember Tom Tanner, Chief Financial Officer, really sweating the numbers, getting, total numbers, getting below 13,000 because of how much money our district would be getting in. And when I look at what you guys have here as far as capacity enrollment, it's under 13,000 from when I was on the school board in 2007, 2008. But we're still showing, a gap in capacity because the numbers are the red, right? So we're short. So that's why I asked the question. Just from an outsider looking at raw numbers, we've got less student population than we did back in 2008, but we have, capacity. And I think it's important to articulate how the programs are structured and how you guys get after that using this calculation.
And
So-
I think that's part of the evolution of education today, is that there are more niche
Yeah.
we're seeing a demand for those personalized niche programs. But in addition, I'm curious to know how, like the PEP, where homeschool or private school students can choose to take individual courses on our campuses, how is that reflected in these numbers? And I know we're kind of just starting to enter those types of agreements, but how are we accounting for that in this model?
Honestly, I do not know how we are. We do not know how we can, because sometimes they do just one course. They come in for just one course, and based on if you're considering FTE, it would be the whole day for the seat, right?
These are based on October counts too, right?
Yes.
So it's,
And that-
it's a snapshot.
It changes.
Right.
And so somebody coming in the second half.
But to
of
the
year-
point, I mean, they're using some of the capacity, so.
Yeah, and part of my concern is that recently, there's been a change to allow up to 100% of school capacity in order to accommodate school choice. And so what I'm wondering is, well, then when somebody wants to take advantage of those PEP programs and we now are at 100%, in some cases already at 100%, what impact does that have on the classroom environment or even the staffing ability at that particular school?
That's certainly something to think about. The reason why sometimes, well, in my past experience, I came from Volusia County and we have a level of service 115% of permanent capacity. The reasoning behind it is that at any given time, at any given day, the enrollment count is not 100%. So the schools are able to absorb the students in those classrooms. Again, we do have overcapacity in some of our schools, and we do have we do have options on how to address that, and that is one of the things that will be that is part of the presentation. But one of them is program assignment, where you could put programs in the schools, or virtual schooling, or just rearranging where you assign programs in the schools. Others are rezoning, which is a little bit disruptive. Or if it gets to a level, then either construction of a classroom addition or a new school. But the other ones are, in the past, it's the options that were, strategies that were used was double sessions, or dual enrollments and other things like that, or year-round school year.
So you're saying you would potentially move different programs that are popular to a different school to encourage equity of capacity between schools?
We can recommend, but at the end of the day, it would be teaching and learning who could decide.
Yeah.
I think in Councilman Gambaro's point, that difference you're seeing is the reservations too, in those numbers.
Those reserved capacity does not come in the first year. Normally, in my experience, they come in on the third to fifth year.
Okay,
So
that's a good point.
I'd also, though, be interested to see how many of them have been static that have been unutilized for a while, to the point of the DRIs. Like what part of those numbers are those DRIs that have basically been on the books for 10 years, not being used?
They track them.
We track them all, yeah.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chairman, I guess just to finish, and it kind of ties into your conversation, in the prep share agreements, they have 12 months from when we enter the agreement to get a final plat approval. And then they have 3 years from that date to pull permit. And if they don't do those things, it terminates.
Okay.
Goes back. So we're not in.
The non-DRIs.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
The new prop shares that are coming in, we had this whole discussion.
Right.
And that was where we all landed, and we felt comfortable on those timeframes, so that now, going forward, they have to be moving along.
Right.
Oh, and they can request extensions through the planning agencies?
Sure.
Okay. Okay.
If there are no questions, we can go to the next slide.
Now, it's good review. We have new members that need to be able to, it's very complex. So appreciate the questions.
So this is how we calculate level of service. So your current level of service is your total enrollment plus your reserve capacity, and we divide it by permanent fish capacity. So you have your level of service. Your projected level of service is many years, probably a year to 3 years forward. In my planning, I do my level of service 3 years. So I have my past, my present, and my future, my next year. So I calculate total enrollment plus reserve capacity, plus the number of students generated by the new development. So when I review, if you're coming in, say you're a new development, and I have you're going to be generating 22 students at the elementary level. So I'm going to look at the total enrollment for my elementary, the reserve capacity for that school and the number of students that's going to be generated for that school that's going to be affected, and then all the same divided by permanent fish capacity, and that's your projected level of service for that residential development. So if my projected LOS is below 100%, then I issue the certificate of school concurrency. But if it's above 100%, then that's when we recommend to the developer to either wait out until there's capacity available or negotiate for mitigation. As you know, level of service is applied district-wide by school type. So all the available permanent student stations or school capacity for elementary, when a residential development comes in, we consider all those student stations and all that in all the elementary levels. So there might be, Rimfire might not have the capacity, but if Bunnell has it or the others schools have it, then we still issue concurrency for that school level. Yes.
Lost it, sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is where you were wanting about how we calculate how many students are generated by that development. So each development, our developments have different dwelling unit types: single family, multifamily, and mobile homes. So we multiply that number of dwelling units by unit type. So say single family, if a development has a single family and multifamily design, or whatever was designed in there, we will multiply the single family by the generation rate and the multifamily by the generation rate. And so for each school type, we have a generation rate for the different homes. And then we divide that by the number of students generated at each school level. So for example, one development comes in and is approved 100 single-family dwelling units. And so for that, we multiply the student generation rate for elementary and single-family by 100 and come up with 8.4 students. Since you don't have 8.4 humans, we round it up to 9. And the same is done for middle school and high school. So we calculate the total number of students generated, which is 22 students. As a reminder, 0.084 single family, 0.037, all those generation rates for that house, that's the generation of that house, student generation rate of that house for its whole career of its whole lifetime. It does change based on the occupancy in new developments. And so when new developments come in and they're occupied and students come into those new homes, so those new homes are included in the calculation of the student generation rate.
So not to skip ahead, but since this was basically the summary of the one recommendation, was regarding student generation rates, and the consultant does this annually for the district to make sure, and past history has shown it has not deviated significantly, so the recommendation was to do it every 2 years. But this is what the recommendation is referring to, this slide right here.
Right.
Okay.
And that's in line with other districts and other jurisdictions, once every 2 or every 3 years, because it does tend to be, somewhat the same, and it costs the school district money for the consultant every year to do
And
analysis.
this data is based on local data, right? This is district data, okay. So it's not based on like some state number or something like
Correct.
that, where our demographics may be different.
This is for Flagler.
Okay.
And we've had Davis has done it, and Power Schools did it, and I don't know if we have another.
JV Pro.
JV Pro. So we've got several different consultants have done it, we've come up with generally the same number. That was why we felt like it was a reasonable request.
I remember my question now.
Okay.
So just for my information, what is a typical mitigation agreement? Is it like, what are we doing? Are we increasing capacity with portables, or how are we doing that?
So for a mitigation agreement, we look at how many students are generated at each school level. For now, we have capacity in the elementary level, so they don't mitigate for that. But we don't have capacity in the middle and high school level, and so that's where they mitigate. They pay for, they mitigate for each student station that they're going to be generating based on the cost factors that is
The state sets it.
the state dictates for that month that the application comes in.
So they're basically just paying for it based on that formula, and then we're doing something within the schools in order to allow for more capacity, or how's that working?
So the district's required to set aside the funds and put it towards a project that directly mitigates that issue.
Okay, so
If we don't have it in our plan today, they have to set that money aside until there is something in the budget that they can put it towards.
So similar to impact fees, like it has to be specifically used for
Correct.
growth.
That's right,
Yeah,
that's
and-
right. And then we're also issuing a dollar-for-dollar credit as a voucher
Off of
towards,
property?
towards impact fees.
Impact fees, okay.
So when they come in and start pulling permits, and you would normally collect an impact fee, they're showing up with a voucher
Mhm.
that says, I have 25 units.
Because they've done this in advance.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Chair?
Yes.
So when you're saying that the middle and high schools are over capacity, I haven't seen, we know the build on from Matanzas, but I haven't seen portables or other expansions at the middle schools. You know, we did Buddy Taylor quite some time ago. So I guess what is is there a time frame in which we must act in order to utilize those funds? And then a second question is, Belterre does have concretables. I'd like clarification on, are those considered portables, or are they considered permanent stations? Because I've kind of heard both.
Concretables, we consider them based on fish. They are modulars, they are considered permanent student stations.
So what about the timeline in terms of to use this money in order to expand, extend?
It's at the school district's discretion.
I think what you find, which is the problem with planning, is the reserve stations. The utilization rate will show that the school's over capacity, but in reality, it's not, because there's reserves go students.
So that buffer.
And they
So
come
So
there's
in.
you
an
wait for a
emergency,
trigger
yeah.
on that buffer.
It's a complex planning.
It is a complex planning problem that we wish we had been solved long ago.
Which is made worse by the students having more options.
To that end, I think what sometimes makes me a little hesitant is when we look at the data broken out, private schools actually have increased quite a bit, even over some of the homeschool vouchers. But we don't really have a lot of private schools, so it's like, where are these private schools? If the legislature were to put restrictions on definitions of the qualification of a private school, I believe that was on the table somewhat, it didn't go through, but if that happened, we would see a pretty quick 180 in the change of those students. I'm sure some would try to absorb to homeschool and some with the public school. So there's always that chance that they may actually enact that restriction of what is defined as a private school, because there has been some cases of fraud with these scholarships and the private schools. So I guess that's a reservation that I have in getting really close to that line as well.
I think we all don't really know. Every year is a little different. from the legislature in the last 2 or 3 years. And so it's, you know, I think we're all still in kind of a change mode before we see a real, how it's gonna shake out. You know.
And the opposite end of that is you don't want to overbuild, because then you can't afford
Right.
staffing schools that are empty.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
I haven't heard nothing about technical schools in Florida. Are we moving towards them for the high schools to have, I think St. Johns County has one. Have, where the students have a choice between continuing high school or going to these technical schools. Have we even looked at that?
I can say that our superintendent is looking at various ways in which we can start to capture some of these students that want to do alternative ways of getting their education. However, we don't have any of that per se as a whole school, but we have several CTE programs throughout our district, in Matanzas High School as well as at LBC, where students can graduate with a Diploma Plus. And so as they come out, for example, we've got a firefighting academy, we've got veterinary, we've got Embry Riddle. So we've got several programs that we are offering now that offer students not just a diploma, but something in the realm of an additional certification in a technical field that they can use once they graduate.
I know the federal government's looking at it, for putting money into towards technical schools instead of just your basic colleges. And I was just wondering if the school boards in Florida are looking towards adding more of those technical schools and hopefully get maybe federal money for that.
I do know as a state where there are things that we've been pushing to have more CTE certifications throughout different schools. They're doing kind of surveys and things from different areas to see what are the most prevalent professions and how can we support those with the different types of programs that we're offering at our schools. And so, like I said, we are offering things at our schools now that allow our students to move on and have different certifications. Another additional one we've got where we have our students that can graduate with a CNA license. So we've got a medical unit on medical flagship at FPC as well. So we are looking at various ways to provide our students those skills that you're talking about within the framework of what we already have.
It won't affect the elementary schools and probably middle schools, but it would affect enrollment, I guess, in the high schools, I guess.
We also have, as far down as our middle schools, we do have certifications that we offer, depending on what school you go into. Like in culinary, we can offer some things like serve safe and things of that nature, where students can work towards certain certifications. So we are trying to ensure that we're providing opportunities for our kids to get something more than just a high school diploma, and that can actually start in middle school.
Ms. Reddy?
Yes, so we also have, of course, the FTC, and I don't see it as high school diploma or a technical. In fact, we are incentivized by the state to ensure every student graduates with something more than a high school diploma. So we actually encourage that, and there are programs with FTC that students may take advantage of as early as in high school. The limiting factor is, however, as you know, those trades can be lucrative, and it's difficult in order to get people to teach those courses at the pay scale that we can offer. So it isn't as much space because a lot of those programs can occur in the evening, and FPC being right next to FTC is a place that can happen. So it's really more of the limitation on salaries from my interaction with Ms. Kirkland as the liaison from FTC. So the other part of that is, yes, our state has done a lot in order to support and promote career programs, but in our particular area for Flagler, those funds were commingled with 2 other counties, and the control of those those funds are not within Flagler. And even though our unemployment rate is higher than those other 2 counties that we share those funds with, we get a lower percentage. And we have a career source office that is the contribution of those funds to our particular county. So I would like to see that grow and become greater and advocate for some more of that.
Yeah. There's one other thing is,
It's Brevard and Volusia.
one other thing that I'm hearing just recently is about that 2-year program in the high school where you can go to college and get your college degree. I'm hearing that it's because the junior colleges switched over to a 4-year degree that it's not, your students are not getting the benefits from that anymore.
No,
It's harder for them to get into these schools, like these 4-year schools, because they want you to come to their school and get those 2 years plus the 4, the
Quickly
freshman.
though, because we got to get back on topic.
Sorry, yes, no,
this-
I'm not seeing that, they're still pretty popular, and actually, I believe there's some sort of legislation about being able to move those credits as long as they're around in state schools, but at the end, it's a competition. If you're gonna, when UF has 60,000 applicants, and they've got kids who have over 5.0 GPAs, and then you have a student who has, yes, an associate's degree, but maybe their grade level isn't as higher, in the end, that's competition.
Okay, well, it's not, I didn't want to get off track here, but it does affect the admission into the high school. I mean, if they're not in the high school, they're at the college, Daytona College going to school instead of at the high school. So it leaves openings, I guess. That's it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. We have already discussed how proportionate share mitigation occurs, so, let's go to, this is what the formula is for mitigation, other mitigation options. Sometimes contributions of land when there's a really big development, sometimes the donation or the dedication of a school site is one of those mitigation options. Next slide, please. So this is where we discussed about addressing overcapacity in schools. This is from least disruptive to the more disruptive ones. When there's overcapacity, we look at program placement, virtual schools, adding portables, realignment of grades. For example, what we have just happened, taking 6th grade to middle school. Other districts have done grade centers or paired schools, so sometimes if there's overcapacity, they have primary center, which is kinder VPK to the 2nd grade, and then they have intermediate centers, which is 3rd grade to 5th grade. And then you have school zone changes. That's a bit more disruptive. We change the attendance boundaries of the schools. We consolidate or convert schools from PK, an elementary, to K-8 or a middle high. We combine schools. And then most costly is classroom additions, because it involves construction dollars and new construction. New construction also may involve rezoning. Next slide, please.
I've got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Can you go back on that slide? So when you say virtual schools, is that Flagler? What are the examples? Or, because I know if you go into let's say the student moves into Florida virtual school, that pulls them out of our
We do have Flagler virtual.
Flagler virtual, Flagler, okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to know what the categories were when we're saying virtual schools. Thank you.
Next slide, please. The annual report overview, you have it on your annual reports. The enrollment trends we're seeing with income caps removed from vouchers from last year. If you could go to the next slide, please. We have seen a steep increase in private schools. So your scholarships and your family empowerment scholarship and your PEPs, they normally go to virtual school or home school for purchase of programs. And we have the other school planners in other districts who have discussed this. We are looking at, because there might be still more changes to the school voucher program that might be legislated in the next few years. So this is not going to be stabilizing in the next 3 to 5 years. But if there's a silver lining, and I'd like to think that there is that huge silver lining, your your county private schools can only absorb so much. So what we're looking at, what the other planners, what are the state planners are looking at, the school planners are plateauing those in 6 years or 5 to 6 years. Those students are going to be returning to traditional public schools if there are going to be any growth in enrollment. This is the market share for this year. It's another way of showing that line graph. And this is an example of where our students are going. PEP, non-public schools, which is your private schools, and your home education. Those are some of where the school vouchers and PEP students may be going. Next slide, please. And this is our projection that Power School has done. We are showing a decrease next year, but a modest increase in the next few years. Of course, this might change based on changes to the school vouchers program.
And who prepared these projections?
Power School, our consultant.
Okay. So a quick question is, right, over the last, from the 17-18 year to the 24-25 year, there was a net increase of 492. Yet over the next 5 years, there's twice the amount projected. So just curious as to those methodologies or metrics that they're using, because the trend's still not, is for students in alternative education. So I'm not sure where the extra increase is coming, but they're not here.
They're looking at growth and birth rate, and I know for other counties I represent, they're showing similar, a little bit of a reduction over the next 2 years, and then back to modest growth. And I think, sort of frankly, like this is such a, it's been a new change, and it's been different each of the past couple of years. And so again, it's hard to, I'm sure it's hard for them in forecasting for that as well.
Yep. Okay.
Next slide. This is your capacity snapshot for May 2025. This is just a snapshot, so it's a snapshot in time. It's not right now we're deconflicting the DRIs, so this snapshot is going to change. Other developments are also coming in, so this will definitely change in the next few months. Next slide, please. Let's go to the jurisdictional updates. First is the City of Bunnell.
Good afternoon, Christine Hancock, City of Bunnell. So what we have in front of us is a population projection from 2018 all the way up to 2025. You can see we started in 2018 at 3,056. 2025 we're at 4,315. So it's steadily going up. Next slide. Residential building permits from January to December 2024. We had 7 single-family residents and 4 mobile homes. For so far this year, though, from January, we've had 50 single-family homes and 1 mobile home. So we're definitely getting a lot more this year. New residential developments that have been approved: Grand Reserve Phase 6 at 141 single-family homes, and then Phoenix Crossing with the 28 multifamily apartments. And then the last part is our possible future developments, the reserve at Hawk Creek, and then the Tupelo projects. Thank you.
Any questions?
Are those 50, are those mostly in Grand Reserve?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's phase 5 that we're permitting now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have Flagler Beach right now. If you could go to the next slide, please. City of Palm Coast.
Good afternoon. Jason DiLorenzo for the City of Palm Coast. If you look at the first column, this is our total for 2024. 2,306 units in all categories. About 170 more than the previous year, 2023. And our 5-year annual average is about 2,100 homes. As you continue to look across the chart from our year-to-date through March, you'll see we have 779 so far. Interesting to note, this remains consistent for us that our ITT, our original platted lots from the late 60s, early 70s, are making up about 75% of new construction still, which means they are not in the subdivisions that are eligible for proportionate fair share or concurrency.
Which again further complicates planning.
Yes, it does, because you have no idea when they're
Right.
coming. Right. There's no way to. There's no build out schedule that you can rely on or anything else. Right. Exactly. Looking at the certificate of occupancies, we had 2,036 for the year 24. So far this year, we're at 859. That includes 272 multifamily units. We are averaging about 1,800 COs. Obviously, that's a lagging indicator, usually 9 to 12 months behind permit for construction of those units. I think the 272 are primarily in the town center and the Wilton apartments, luxury apartments there near Brookhaven. Next slide. May I ask a question?
Yes.
Chair, I think Commissioner Young had a very interesting point that I don't think was realized. I believe you were asking about, is the district accounting for students that are leaving campus to go to work on their AA degree at either Daytona State or elsewhere, or from home in virtual classrooms? I believe that was what you were
one of my points,
conveying. Yeah, so I'm interested in that answer. Is there some realization of the students that are leaving campus where their student stations are available because they're taking college courses?
They're still,
If they count as 0.5.
they're still considered students on our campuses, and they're gonna be graduating from whatever school they're going to. So they are calculated, they should be calculated.
As remaining in the classroom,
Because
even though they're not there.
Well, they are there, because they'll go to school part of the day, and they'll leave early to go
Right.
to, take their college courses.
And
Understood.
it's not 100% clear on how many classes
Yeah,
they may
no.
take. It could be one class to go to Daytona State for. Now, I know if they are full-time virtual enrollment, then they're considered virtual and not necessarily on the campus. So that is considered. But there's a lot of vacillation they might start on virtual in the first 4 weeks and hate it and then go back to school. It's very fluid.
Yeah, I think that's one of the items that complicates going to a utilization model, because that would change. I mean, programming could change annually, but that could change, daily or monthly, or
Well,
by semester, I guess.
Yeah.
If we had more historical data, you'd be able to create a factor for that, but we don't, and that's the problem, right? So in these next 5 years, we have to just consume the data, and then I'm sure, actuaries will be able to spin that up for us, but we're in that transition.
And complicated with the legislature not funding those programs and changing those utilization again of students using those as options.
Thank you.
I don't know how we get a grasp of any of all this when you figure out all the options that are out there.
I do have a question. I'm imagining, like anything, right, we have a limited amount of land. So at some point, you're going to have maximum capacity. How close are we to that? Because wouldn't that indicate that there's some sort of, at some point, that rate will, certificate of occupancies will start to slow?
No, because our build out is, Ray, do you know what our 2050 number is? 167.
That's the
167 population of 167,000 by 2050, and we are not landlocked yet. We have a very long way to go, probably another 22 to 25,000 acres.
Yeah, there's
of undeveloped. So.
And I know you guys recently set aside that particular area for a preserve. Is there future plans to do that in order to have a balance?
Of open space?
Making, like reserving land for, I don't know what you call it, I'm sorry.
That was a park. I think they were reserving it for a park.
Parks, or to
Oh,
say,
yes.
hey, this is just not gonna be, this is a buffer, this is a nature preserve.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Our comprehensive plan lays out the level of service for all of those, and all future growth will have to continue to meet that level of service.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's specific ratios of those different things, parks, green spaces, things like
Okay.
that, as well as economic development
commercial.
requirements and things like that, all included within that. And that level is much higher than current Palm Coast exists at. So, it'll be,
Yeah.
over time, it'll be an improvement on the whole in terms of what that looks like. That's some of that land out there, but there is also potential for annexation to continue to grow the amount of land. So to Jason's point, there's potentially a lot of runway, it will all be long gone when that's going on, but we still have to plan for it.
What was the original ITT build out, 250,000?
250, something around there.
And we've reduced density over the years on a lot of that stuff.
And if I may, I'll just add that the city council recently adopted an updated comprehensive plan out to 2050. And the land use category for west of the railroad tracks is new, and it has a density limit of 1.2 units per acre. So it's very low density. So which will create a lot of more open space. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Mr. Mangle.
Adam Mangle, Flagler County. Go to the next slide. And so this is a summary, and I think you probably gathered by now that those who are new to the Oversight Committee that our reporting to you is intended to give you some foreshadowing of things that are in the pipeline for us. And so using that kind of middle column for us, we've got some preliminary plats that have been approved, and so that gives you some idea of what will then lead from preliminary plat to final plat. And so then when final plats come up, then you're going to start having those in the pipeline for construction, for your vertical construction for your homes. And so then we're tracking then those things kind of in that development pipeline, and then those then lead to the permitting. And so residential permits issued, we want to tell you about those every year, and then COs. And so that time frame for us still from permit issuance to CO, I think is somewhere around probably still about 12 to 14 months. We're still seeing some supply issues with, you can go and get your garage door at Home Depot, you can't get the garage door you want there. And so it's still something where you're having some of those delays that are still running through the system right now. But for us, I mean, the numbers are kind of scarily very close there with the number of single family. That doesn't always happen where it looks like, oh, this is happening within that year. It's not actually that, because there's some lag. There's some things that are in the pipeline, permit issued, and they take longer to CO. But what you'll see there for us, and then jumping to the last column, is that most of what we're still seeing for our growth, mobile homes, I guess I actually go back to the first one. Mobile homes are mostly in the Mondex on the west end of the county, Daytona North. Our single family development's happening still mostly for us within the Hunters Ridge and Plantation Bay DRI. We do have a few areas of some infill that's happening, Palm Coast Plantation, and some of the units that are still filling out there. Still some build out in Hammock Dunes, both of those not having age restrictions, and then you can see there the final plats that we have that are coming through the pipeline. So out of those, Plantation Bays, both at 9B and 12A, are of course within the Plantation Bay DRI. Wexford Cove is outside of Plantation Bay, on the east side of 95, a small parcel that we didn't even anticipate to have part of any kind of development, but came forward with a change, a land use amendment, and then eventually the plat that we have there for 81 units. And then the garden site at Ormond Station's down in Hunters Ridge, and so we still see the activity there. That summary on the right-hand side, the DRI status, is actually through the entirety of that history there. So what you're seeing there, and we're trying to report that now to the school district, because there's some milestones related to the DRIs that we need to make sure that our decision makers know about. And so presently, 588 platted lots in Hunters Ridge DRI, 454 permits issued, 425 COs, and that's through, I think, right at the end of the year. In Plantation Bay, having the 1,728, 1,471 permits issued, and then 1,450 COs issued out of that 471 permits. Generally speaking, I can at least quote on Plantation Bay, we have somewhere around 50 to 60 units that are happening annually there on kind of our build out, that how it works. And so they'll continue to have a stream ongoing until, I think their total unit count somewhere around 3,000 if I'm remembering correctly. And so they'll continue to have more plants come up, and then their absorption rate right now is somewhere around 50 units. No age restrictions in Plantation Bay. Some were in Hunters Ridge, but not in the new section of Hunters Ridge. And we do have one age restriction that's kind of in a pipeline right now for the Crestwind project you see there in the middle. That's currently in a preliminary plat, not moving quite forward yet to final plat. That Crestwind potentially is the one we've got in the pipeline that will be age restricted. Maybe hopped around a little bit with that. I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Questions, Flagler County questions?
And Hunters Ridge, the school parcel was returned back, so there's that interlocal, I guess, or agreement. There's some of those southern are using Volusia schools.
Yes.
But we still do have buses going down there.
We do, yes. Yeah. And it's going to be hard to ever make that not happen, because we do have those areas outside off of Rima Ridge,
right.
Romeo, so we'll still have some need there for that. And then the one point to mention there is that they were under that agreement. I'll go ahead and speak bad about the developer. I think they finally came current with their payments, but they were late on their payments, and so we had a bit of a nail-biting time there where we were wondering what we were going to have to do, but I think now they are current. So.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
These are the proposed bills that we've that are related to the interlocal work that we were tracking. There were other bills that we tracked with regards to. So 569 was the bill that rattled me a bit, because now charter schools can receive educational impact fees. Now the problem with that was the administrative complexity that would involve if charter schools receive impact fees. The other one was 665, which was part of, which included for if you increase impact fees, you have to do a, although the school district does already have study that we do whenever we propose a school impact fee increase, or if we review the impact fees. This time the legislature wanted to define how those studies are going to be done. Fortunately, it didn't pass, but it will come again the
Was that
next.
specifically for school impact fees or all impact fees?
All impact fees.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's just continuing to restrict us in that regard.
Yes, and then you have the charter schools. One of the things that we were looking at was that based on, well, districts cannot purchase or acquire property if they were showing a decrease in their enrollment, and so there were several changes in the proposal, but because of what happened with the budget, that will also probably appear in the next cycle.
Are all three of these not active?
Not anymore, but
Okay.
they will come in.
Right. Next year, some form or version of them.
Some version.
Right.
Although we have, I was part of the APA Florida Legislative Committee that reviewed this bill, and we have submitted our, the APA Florida submitted their recommendations and comments on those bills. So let's see what happens next school, like next cycle.
Okay.
And the chair,
That's it for yours?
it's yours, yes.
Okay.
I have
Very good.
one question on that. On that previous one where it says that you have to occupy for 5 years, I'm just trying to comprehend that. Is that to mean that if that were to go through next year, we have to have owned the property for 5 years before we could put a school on it?
I don't think,
No, it was requiring disposal of
Yeah.
land.
Disposal.
If you have land that isn't being utilized, which is, there was no definition for what that meant. And there were different variations in the bill. One of them had a percentage, like 4% over 5 years reduction. Then if you had land that you weren't utilizing, you were required to dispose of it, and you couldn't acquire more.
yes, and
It's ridiculous, and it's
So
very
it's
difficult for us.
preventing school districts from buying land at a current price at a discount for maybe future
That's right.
development.
It doesn't allow land banking.
Right.
Is what they're trying to avoid, which is very difficult for us.
and the one that would determine if you could dispose or acquire is the DOE, not the district, based on the language that was on that proposed legislation.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
I missed that one, you're saying that the private schools get impact fees, or
Charter
they're
schools.
trying to get, they are?
Charter schools, so.
Charter schools.
There was a way that they could request to get impact fees to fund.
What if you teach your kids at the house?
Well,
Would
that's
I-
the other
if I-
programs.
Would they get a impact
I
fee
want some
too?
impact fees from apps.
Part of it?
That's the
I mean,
scholarship they get.
The problem with that is that they did not change the part in the statutes that says that this school board, the public schools, are required to have a seat for everybody. And it says that the charter schools, it may send your child there. You know, they have to have a seat for all those kids. And the charter school, the parent can decide at any time to move them
Well,
back.
the
So
prob-
that's the,
yeah.
they get the money to build the school, and then we have to have a seat.
But the problem is we have charter schools in Bunnell, and they come and go, just like our restaurants. And, you know, they'll get the impact fee, but then they don't stay in business very long.
That would be, and I think there's some language in the statute that if the school district approves a charter and they build a building and they fail, and that's part of the charter, is you could build in that the district would get the building back. So I think that's the other piece of that we're on. It's all, there's a lot that goes into all these, makes it difficult to understand in a short period of time.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I think the impact fee legislation, Senate Bill 482 and House Bill 665, I think that one's still alive because we as a city are still.
Is it?
That's why we're considering our impact fees now before the implementation of this legislation, because we think it's very likely it could happen, because we can implement the full amount now.
Yes.
This forces us, or force all the municipalities and different boards to stagger it over time and at a different threshold. But we're looking at some extraordinary growth, right, with the population expanding pretty quickly for our city. And we see that we need those fees now and the maximum amount in order to be able to project for infrastructure and things of that nature. So, yeah, we see that one is happening potentially.
665, you said is?
Yeah, it's the Senate Bill 42 and House Bill 665. And what they're looking at doing is, if you're going to implement a fee, you can only charge so much per year. It staggers over a period of time.
Extraordinary circumstances
Yes.
take unanimous approval instead of supermajority.
Supermajority, 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
So that's why we're taking.
I think there's also a further a restrictive definition of extraordinary circumstances. Right now, it's just us making a case for it, however we want to, based on the standards that's been done in the past.
Studies.
I think that-
Whereas now, there'll be like a defined.
Yeah, they have
definition of
defined extraordinary circumstances and the type of study that you have
Yeah.
to do.
And today you already have phasing requirements in the law today over 4 years. So it looks like it's pushing that out longer. And you can only do it every 4 years.
So it's interesting, I think, it's like, if it's between 25 and 50%, you have to phase it, but once you get to extraordinary, then there's no
You can increase by
definition.
100%.
You can do it tomorrow, like, you don't have, you get 90 days, I think is the
Right,
requirement.
I understood.
So it's interesting that they don't define a phased approach for greater than 50%, but up to 50% they do. I don't know why they did that, but yeah, there's definitely some changes coming, and I'm sure there'll be more the next year as well. They're pushing this further every year. You guys did, was it 2 or 3 years ago? Was your
I
last?
wasn't there.
It was
22.
22, it was just before I was elected.
Yeah. I know yours, ours, based on population essentially is extraordinary. I know you guys have different definitions for enrollment versus that, so I'm not sure if you guys even fall into that category or not, but we definitely, are moving ours ahead in the interest of getting it done before any of this can get through.
A question on did we have a slide on the 5-year capital plan?
We don't. It's included in your annual report,
Okay.
in the appendix.
So for capacity projects, within the 5-year plan, is there, I know we just finished Matanzas, but what's beyond Matanzas?
There's one in 2029. That's in the 5-year work plan. It would be in, let's see.
Page of the annual
Looking at
report.
it will be in the appendix, the last page. And it's gonna be page 8 of the appendix of the 2025 work plan, where you have
So we have this year for Matanzas.
oh,
New
Wait.
addition to Matanzas. Technology, capital,
see it.
location to be determined.
Sorry, give me a second.
47 million.
That's not a capacity though.
No.
It's just-
It's gonna be,
Oh, and additions of capital outlay projects.
Mr. Dance?
Yes.
Exactly what were you asking, I'm sorry?
Within the 5-year capital plan, is there a proposed capacity project?
Currently, as far as portals, and I'm Corey Bush, Director of Plant Services, I apologize. We have looked at Belter, Indian Indian Trails as far as adding portables that we have our eye on because of capacity. And then the two high schools, as far as building a school, we have slated for 2029, and that has continued to move to the right because of enrollment or being flat or losing some of that. So we will continue to keep our eye on. But to add portables, that will be, you know, it's all the things that you all are talking about is our challenge. We thought we were going to need to start putting portables in a few places. Unfortunately, because of the numbers, we haven't. We have that on our radar, but it goes back to the funding, the money to put the portables in. When you're doing that, you require staff, so it's a challenge. But we don't have anything specific on the 5-year plan other than a middle school and a high school in 2029. But that would be just the beginning, starting part of it. Realistically, they wouldn't open for 2.5 to 3 years after that if those numbers this year in October, when we get those numbers, if it still maintains the same.
So that's scheduled for 29-30 because it's not on the 28-29. You mean
Correct.
29-30?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am, yes. That's where it's projected to where we would start the build, the process of contractor and building all that again. Opening would be approximately 3 years after that, realistically, based on the numbers. So in that time, what would happen is we would have to have obviously portables that we would be bringing in because there would be some of the students at those schools would be in portables. Then once the school opened, then you would have to rezone, move the kids in the school, then those portables that we had brought in would go away.
The
Yes,
answer is
sir.
yes, in 29.
Yes.
Yep.
So that still allows you, if it's within the 5-year capital plan, you still can get your proportionate share funds in. But those are, right, you have a certain time to spend those as well.
We have to set them aside and spend them on that,
Right.
For capacity increases.
relating to the impact.
And is some of that still going to pay off Rimfire? Or is Rimfire paid off?
I don't know the answer to that
I
question.
don't know the answer to that.
We'll have to find that out for you. And I assume those funds would be coming from impact fees and not necessarily from prop share.
Okay. Can you continue to slide the 5th year down? Is that what the challenge is at some point? At what point do we pull the trigger? Is there a capacity number where you pull the trigger on a high school?
Yes, and I think you can speak to this.
Yes.
They're
And
now
the state
looking
has
at-
control of that to a degree, right?
Mhm. So they will look at our enrollments and at our capacities. And a high school is normally upwards of 1,700 student stations. If they see that our student stations at that school level is beyond, then they may approve a new school. The first year would be the design. The design, the next 1.5 would be the actual construction, and then the 3rd year would be the furnitures and fixtures, FF&E.
But you're looking at perhaps a middle school,
Yes.
high school, something.
A
that
combination?
That might, that's what you're.
Yes, right now, we're in the red in the middle school, about 250 student stations, and then in high school, about 850. So.
I think if we wanted to get creative, technically Rimfire was built to be an elementary middle school, and it is currently at a half capacity. The struggle is that even putting 6th graders with the elementary, that caused a lot of stress with parents and putting those two groups, kindergartners and 6th graders, on the same bus. So the question would be, would they have alternate times and, the whole busing thing, but that is a potential to but then that would require rezoning for probably some of that.
Yeah,
Buddy Taylor Group.
I guess as a recommendation for the working group is looking at that, that point that on high school levels, if that's the next plan, if you've got that in the 5-year window, exactly how many high school students are going to be required for the state to release you to do that, so that we can track that number. That's the next big construction project.
The other thing is you can also address your capacity issues at the secondary level by probably combining middle high.
Right.
But it would also involve rezoning. And the question would be, based on the growth patterns, where would you want to put that school?
So that's part of our working group, works on the school siting issues during their meetings.
Yes.
And looking at trends and where the siting would go. Okay. All right. So as far as tasks that we have left to do here, we have to review and approve the annual report that you've submitted to us with any corrections or changes that anybody's seen or accepted as is.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
I see one thing. On the last meeting, I was here in attendance. Our Vice Mayor, Don Roger, wasn't here. Of course, you got that right on the front page. But the last 2 pages, you have where I made comments, but you put John Rogers making the comments, and that's the only thing I could see.
We've done the minutes before, but if we could make
I know,
those
I
changes.
just noticed that. I saw this.
That's
and I
okay.
thought, well,
That's okay.
no. But your name's on there, so it's correct.
So I guess, do we approve as submitted? It's up for us to
The annual report.
approve the ILA annual report for 24-25. So if anybody would like to motion approval of the annual report.
Mr. Chair, so moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Gambaro.
I'll second.
Sorry, my left ear heard that first.
Okay,
over here.
that's fine.
I have a second by Commissioner Carney. Any other comments for the staff on the annual report? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of approving the annual report as submitted signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Next up is discussion of schedule and the next meeting date. Again, we target this time every year around June. So what would be our available dates?
The interlocal agreement defines it as the second Thursday,
Okay,
and that would be June 11th.
excuse me?
June the 11th.
June 11th to the 26th.
That's my birthday.
So we'll make
Yeah,
sure we have a
cake.
cake. Make sure we have a cake.
We'll have cupcakes for you.
Does anybody have any problems with June 11th of 2026? Okay.
About the time.
It's like making a dental appointment.
And
Remember that one? That'd be easy one.
God,
I suppose I don't have a
rats, you
conflict,
know?
yeah, that's
1 o'clock as well, is 1 o'clock same? Okay, do you need a motion for that? Will somebody like to move that meeting date for me?
Move approval.
I have a motion by Mr. Furry,
Second, Mr. Chair.
seconded by Mr. Gambaro. That's for approving the June 11th, 2026 date for the next annual, for our oversight committee meeting. All those in favor signify with aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. All right, so the next item for that is approval of the working group recommendation. That's the change the frequency of establishing the student generation rate from annual to biannual, every 2 years.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Miller and seconded by Commissioner Carney. I will go ahead and, we do have one guest here. I want to make sure we open it up for public comment on this, if there was any comments on the recommendation from the annual for the group.
I'd be happy to take it up with you after the meeting. I would not want to interrupt the proceedings here.
Okay, so is there any other comments on the recommendation for the approval of changing the student generation rate from annual to biannual? All right, hearing none, we'll bring it back, call the question. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. We do have general public comments, sir, if you would like to make any comments regarding what's occurred today, the school, this oversight committee, or the information we've talked about.
If I may, can I just have this lady read what I have to read on May 19th?
Flagler schools face 2.5 million deficit as 400 students leave district for private vouchers and 3% enrollment decline.
The data, I don't know, I'm looking at the data for the first time, but it just doesn't seem to be consistent with that report from May 19th.
The enrollment that we have in the report is traditional public schools only, and it does not include charter schools and BPK. Traditional schools decreased by about 1.03% this school year, but since charter schools are included in public schools, it's going to be more, but we normally look just at traditional public schools, which is our schools. And then we look at the market share for private schools, charter schools, and homeschool. So the 3% is, I don't know where that came from. It might be the whole student body for Flagler County.
I can add some context to that. So the scholarships for parents to choose homeschool or private school is awarded on average about $8,000 per student. Unless they have physical therapy needs or others, they could get more funds. So when a parent takes their child out of our schools with that scholarship voucher, then they come back around. Not only do we lose the money from essentially their seat, but then they take that scholarship fund money out from us. And so that is like, it's like we have to give money back. So that's probably the number in terms of the overall negative that we're seeing. But yet, while our enrollment is relatively flat, losing 300, 400 students or something, you wouldn't think that's a big deal. But when we're losing them to the scholarships and they take the money out, it's creating a dent.
Because there was a calculation done previously on estimate of what our student calculation was going to be. But when the next calculation came out, we saw that their numbers were off, so that because they couldn't anticipate how many were going to go into the vouchers. So that offset that. That's where that $2.5 million was money that we were allocated, thinking that those students were going to be enrolled in Flagler schools, but they ended up somewhere else.
Well, I looked at it and read it. If may I continue the conversation?
Go ahead.
Sure. When I read it, I thought when the index for student funding was established, it looked like it was in October.
Yes.
And did what you read take into account those seniors graduating from school? And do your numbers indicate that?
Yes.
And I apologize, I didn't get this at the beginning. I do need your name for the record, please.
I sent you a LinkedIn for
No, but
connection.
it's we're recording the minutes, so you have to state your name
Mike
for the record.
Janis.
Pardon
Mike
me?
Janis, I'm a driver for transportation.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Okay, at that point, is there any comments from each of us here at the dais, that closing comments that you want to make or see? Any directions to the working group for next time? Mr. Gambaro.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Enjoyed the discussion, and I really appreciated the understanding the analysis on how you, calculated the deltas in your capacity and where the need would be, and also the nuances as to how the different programs affect that. That was really important for me to see and understand as we kind of look at the broader, community as a team. That's helpful and helps us articulate when we look at second and third order impacts of all the decisions that we make across the board. So I just wanted to say thank you for that and enjoy the discussion.
Anybody else? I will say, I guess just closing comments, I'm from the school district side, I'm really worried about the constant policy changes. I can't imagine the difficulty in being able to plan when each year it's the end games keep shifting, whether it's school choice and then the impacts that has on students and more choices, but also I think it was already raised that the next step is coming after impact fees.
Yes.
So
Well, they already have a little bit.
Right.
In phasing it and having extraordinary circumstances, all that exists today. They're just taking another step.
Well, between private schools, charter schools looking for that share and allocation based on the number of students that are leaving, it's going to make it more difficult to plan. Because unless the legislation changes, like you said, the legislation puts that onus on the public school system to have capacity for the students.
You have even more issues in that vein of live local and things like that. So planning for entitlements, well, now all of a sudden those entitlements change to residential versus commercial. So now you have potentially more students that were unplanned.
100% unplanned, yeah.
And what happens when the federal government turns the schools over back to the states? Is that going to be anything change on that? Where they're...
Well, the federal dollars, those are more for specialty programs versus, most of it is all controlled by the state. Our schools are controlled locally, but there are programs that we receive federal funding from, like Title I and IDEA. That's to be determined how the administration is going to allocate those funds back to the states in the future. There's the talk of eliminating the Department of Education, so then who's taking over that role? Are they going to just send it down to the states and let the states decide how that money is going to be dispersed? That's a bigger conversation, but there's definitely more to come on that question.
I would argue, though, that those funds aren't necessarily special programs. IDEA ensures students with disabilities can have the same access. For example, could be accessible equipment to move around the school, or certain computers, physical therapy. And so we know that it does take additional funding for those students. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the state would disperse those funds.
Some of the food programs are also federal funds?
The free lunch and breakfast right now, I believe I'm going to defer to him. I think they made some changes last year.
Right now, all of our students receive free lunch, but even when all of our students weren't receiving free lunch, every high school, every student lunch is subsidized some way by the federal government.
Okay. And we even have that continuing through summer, right? There's this.
Yes, we do. We have a meal program that we open them up for certain schools, and we can still provide meals for all of our kids when they go to these schools.
All right, great, thank you all. At this point, I want to thank the working group members in the background. Thank you for your work during the year and giving us the recommendation, appreciate it. To our municipalities, thank you for being here, City of Bunnell. And Mr. Wilson, good to see you again. So at this point, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.